behind time, but we can't wait any longer because we are going live on Facebook and YouTube. May I ask our parish priest, Father Adam, to give us a prayer, please.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Most High, glorious God, enlighten our hearts. We thank you for gathering us today. We ask your presence, your guidance, and your inspiration as we discuss matters that pertain to our faith, to our doctrine, and to upholding the sanctity and blessedness of Catholic marriage. Lord, you are our guide, you are our help, you are our provider, and you are our source of enlightenment. Be with us always. Strengthen our passion to promote what you will for the world and for families. Strengthen each one of us to evangelize people. Strengthen each one of us to proclaim the beauty of the gospel and the beauty of living according to your will. And strengthen us as we proclaim your gospel to everyone. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit. Saints Francis and Anthony, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Father Adam. Okay, I'll just get right on with it. I'll just like to introduce our resource person, and he will introduce his colleagues afterwards, maybe during the open forum. So this issue of divorce being another of our struggles in the Catholic Church, especially our diocese. On the forefront of it, of course, is people in the Congress. But we have on our side, ALFI. Might have heard of that, no? Alliance for Philippines Foundation. So we introduced its Vice President for the legislation. This is Attorney Joel Arzaga. Take it away, Joel.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Father, for blessing us with your prayer. I have the honor of introducing my colleagues in the Alliance for the Family Foundation Incorporated, or ALFI. I'm with our Senior Vice President, Eileen Araneta, and our Vice President, Chalet Nanuatco. So, thank you so much for having us. It's our second time to be invited here. I was here, I think, sometime last year. Same hall, same beautiful people, and hopefully with the same passion for family and life. So we divided our talk in 3 parts, and we'll start with Ms. Chalet Nanuatco. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so very briefly, I think I'd just like to start off by introducing Alliance for the Family Foundation Philippines, or we call it ALFI, no, for short. We're a multi-sectoral organization that's really, our goal is to preserve and restore Filipino family values, especially in the face of the threats in legislation, in the areas of legislation, proposed and current legislation, government programs, and public projects. So that's why we're allies. That's what Sir Mike said earlier, no? So, and we're here really because of the controversial proposed law to allow absolute divorce in the Philippines, which, as you may all know, Congress has approved, with I think 130 voted yes, 109 voted no, and 20 actually abstained. So if you think about it, 129 actually didn't really say yes, no, to divorce, no. However, divorce actually is unconstitutional, no? Per our constitution, or according to our family code, chapter 1, article 1 on marriage in our family code states that marriage is a special contract of permanent union. So that's why even per constitution, we can already say, hey, divorce is really not permitted in the Philippines. But despite this, right, year in and year out, for the past 25 years, this divorce bill keeps on getting proposed. No? So there must really be a reason why. Imagine 25 years, it keeps on getting proposed. So there must be a reason why, and that's what we're trying to kind of find out in this session or in this talk this afternoon. What is the underlying reason why every year for the past 25 years, we always hear about the divorce bill getting proposed or at the risk of getting passed, and we're always kinakabahan kung, oh my gosh, magkaka-divorce na ba in the Philippines? So as we go through the presentation that we have this afternoon, I'd like to invite you guys also to think about the following, I guess, questions or thought starters. No? So one is, perhaps later on, especially when Attorney Joel goes through the legal side of it, no? Perhaps think about whether there are really gaps in our current legislation or our current laws that would require a new bill or a new law to be enacted or to be passed. So let's think about that. What are the current gaps or their current gaps? Number two, provided that there are gaps, right? To what extent naman would the law hold people accountable for the commitment or their promise when they entered into marriage? Because as we said, it's a special contract, and therefore, you know, these are two supposedly able and free individuals who are getting into the contract. So to what extent will the law or should the law hold these people accountable, no, for their decisions and actions? Okay? And third, how can we help ensure that there are more successful marriages? No? Because we also see a rise in failed marriages, right? So perhaps that's also one way to look at things. How can we help ensure that we put a stop to this rise in trend of failed marriages and start actually bringing in more successful and, I guess, quote-unquote, quality marriages, no, in our society? And lastly, is divorce the solution? Is it the best solution given all of the concerns, no, that perhaps later on we will also try to look at, no, the threats and the concerns? Is divorce the solution? Or perhaps there's a deeper, there are deeper concerns that should be addressed, and maybe the divorce bill would be just like a band-aid solution that kind of ineptly heals the wounds that are actually deeper in nature. So those are just thought starters to begin the presentation. Now, we would also like to propose a mindset shift, right? What do we mean by that? Every time this divorce bill gets talked about, somehow it turns into an argument or a debate. You know? In this age of wokeism, you know, where differing opinions somehow mean there's a me versus you, and that there's always a victim and an oppressor, right? So it's always painted like there's a victim and there's this evil oppressor. Even if, you know, you may have differing opinions, but gone are the days when you have differing opinions and you can actually work together towards a common solution. Because right now what's being propagated is that divisiveness or the divisive nature of the me versus you attitude. Every time a debate and then every time we bring up controversial issues, it goes into a debate. So our proposal is, let's stop that kind of toxic mindset and stop the divisiveness. No, rather work together towards a solution, right, that considers the different perspectives and arrive at something that addresses the main problem recognized by all. So probably finding that common ground that would meet, you know, each other halfway, address the main problem that's recognized by all. So that means also having a shift in tonality. For some reason, every time Catholics talk about the divorce bill, no, they paint us as closed-minded Catholics. Like, oh, I don't know, in this day and age, again, when we try to uphold our values, we're painted as closed-minded right away. Parang we're the ones pa who are not listening, not in touch with society. Perhaps to a certain extent, maybe it's the way we talk about it, or because we're so passionate about our beliefs, we come across as that. But precisely also the call of Pope Francis. Let's shift the tonality into being compassionate Catholics, right? So rather than being anti-divorce, hard stop, no, maybe we just want to portray ourselves as pro-family, because we don't want to be seen as someone as people who are on their high horses and kind of just looking at the problem from afar. And that's a real call, actually, for us. No? A real call for us Catholics and Christians to be compassionate and to empathize with everybody, or especially the aggrieved. So that means we have to make an effort to understand and see where people are coming from. Okay? So the mindset shift and the tonality, we're not palaban, we're not here to argue and counterattack. We're here to hopefully find solutions that will really address the main problem that's recognized by all. And we'll talk about what that main problem is. So being in that space of empathy or being compassionate, let us now take a look at the reality which is always being used by our brothers and sisters who are pushing for the divorce bill, no? And they always bring this to the fore. Let's take a look at the reality that they wish, or that we all wish to address, actually. So as compassionate Catholics, we cannot turn a blind eye to this reality, right? There are real victims in some marriages. Okay, we cannot deny that. There's addiction. There's addiction that afflicts, marriages. There's abandonment. There's also abuse, all sorts of abuse, physical, mental, emotional. There's infidelity, perhaps serial infidelity, for some. And there's also the inability to provide sexual intimacy due to sex reassignment surgery. Now, this last bullet, you'd think, exage naman yan, no? But in this day and age, hindi na siya exage. This really happens already, right? So, these are actual things that happen in marriages. They're very painful if you're the victim, and we have to acknowledge that, no? And we have to empathize with these people. Another fact of our reality is that annulment cases are on the rise. In 2023, the recorded number of filed cases for annulment is around 13,208, no? And this is about a 30+% increase from previous 10 years, which actually the chart just goes up to 2014. But the most recent read is 2023. So it's really on the rise, right? And this means, because it's annulment cases, these are cases that really had grave concerns even before the marriage started, right? So what does that mean? How can we even prevent this from happening? How did we get here? And there are grave issues na pala even prior to getting married, right? It could have been avoided, perhaps, no? But how then can we help in lessening, those types of situations? And also, another reality is, per the Octa research, the most Octa research that they've run, the most recent one that they've run, a significant number of Filipinos feel that it is time for the Philippines to embrace divorce. So that's 43%, not majority, but it is, I think, quite significant. And perhaps, what are the reasons why, behind this? And also, that's something that we need to understand. No? Perhaps they're saying that it's too tedious, it's too costly. That's why divorce will make it so much easier, for the aggrieved parties. And perhaps they're thinking, hey, we're the only place aside from the Vatican who doesn't have divorce, which I personally think is something to be proud of. But maybe for some people, they think, well, does that mean that we're not embracing progress as well, right? But of course, that's not how we view it as Catholics. So really, I think all of these facts and the reality that we've painted, obviously there's a problem, but again, the question is divorce the solution? Okay? So for us to know whether divorce is the right solution, Alfie felt now that we have to really articulate what is the problem ba? What is really the main problem that supposedly the law should address and what we're all trying to resolve. And this is what we've come up with, no? Even just based on the past two slides that we've shown you. So the real problem is violation of human dignity in the home, where one's personhood is diminished because of a spouse's decisions and actions. So there are cases, in marriages, that there's a violation of human dignity in the home, where one's personhood is diminished because of a spouse's decisions and actions. And this is a result of what we've shown you earlier: the addiction, the abandonment, serial infidelity, etc. Okay? So obviously there are victims, but we're not saying that all marriages are like this, but there are some marriages that are like that. And when there is a violation, the law has to step in. Remember I told you earlier, we have to understand why this divorce bill keeps on popping up. And this is kind of where we're going. So there is a violation and the law has to step in. So what can the law actually address? When the law steps in for this, what we're trying to resolve is to rescue the victim out of this oppressive situation. But what the law cannot, however, assure us or give us assurance with is that the law cannot assure that there will be a second chance at marriage, which is to some people equivalent to a second chance at happiness. That's how they see it. But the law cannot give that, right? And based on the statistics in the states, right, where divorce is very much common, second marriages, you have to correct me if I'm wrong, second marriages, actually 60% of second marriages fail, end up in failed marriages. And that percentage actually goes higher for the third and fourth marriages. So there's really no assurance of second chance at happiness when you have that other chance or the second chance at getting married. So obviously, our view is what we're trying to resolve is to rescue the victim from this oppressive situation and not so much giving them or assuring them of a second chance at marriage and happiness. Okay? So we've stated the problem. What then now is the end in mind? What do we want the law to protect? In other words, so we have to be very clear kasi when we try to make a stand about this, right? So we want the law to protect the personhood and human dignity of spouses who are suffering from what we said earlier, all types of abuses. And we want to protect the personhood and human dignity of the victims, of those who are victims of his or her spouse's decisions or actions. So civil society actually has an obligation to protect and to rescue these victims. Okay? Number two, we want the law to protect the rights to a peaceful and loving family atmosphere, however, while upholding and respecting the permanence of marriage. So that's why divorce is an issue, because that actually goes against the permanence of marriage because it dissolves it, right? So what do we mean by this? When we talk about marriage, we talk about it also as a social institution, which means that really it's not just about the couple, that there's an impact to society. Why is there an impact to society? Because marriage is a precursor to family, and family is the basic unit of society. So if there is no permanence in marriage or stability in the family, then that translates to instability of the society. I mean, just simplify it that way, right? If the basic unit of society is unstable, or you tamper with the permanence of marriage, then you also kind of put the future of society at stake. Okay? Number three, we also want the law to hold people accountable for their actions and decisions in living up to their marital commitments and obligations. Because in the first place, assuming, of course, that there was freedom and these are two very capable individuals who entered into marriage, that's just like any other contract. Now, when you sign it, there are certain obligations that you really have to fulfill, right? And this one pa is a special contract, right? It's not a transactional kind of contract as in a business contract wherein there's an exchange of services and goods, right? This one is really a union of two people, a special union of two people. And when they enter into this special contract which is permanent in nature, then the vows that they exchange, we have to to also think that they are accountable and they are obligated to fulfill the vows that they have proclaimed, no, or exchanged during when they entered into the marriage. So really, in sickness and in health, for better or for worse, till death do us part. That's part of the contract, so to speak. And as responsible individuals, we have to stay true to that promise. Lastly, we also want to help couples exercise proper discernment, and that's really related to previous bullet that we have here, in their choice of a lifetime partner in marriage, right? So as mentioned earlier, there is a rise of annulment cases that we see, no, in the past years. And perhaps this one, when we are able to help them exercise proper discernment, that can probably help arrest that rise of annulment cases. So while we do acknowledge that there are real victims in toxic marriages or marriages that are really afflicted by the reasons that we've stated earlier, we also don't want to have this kind of culture. Do you guys recognize these people? Right? So, on the first, the topmost, that's Ben Affleck, getting married to Jennifer Garner. Okay, and then they had some issues. They split up. Then he got married to Jennifer Lopez. And recently, issues na naman. So actually, wala na naman. So that's also our point earlier. It's really not a guarantee that the couples will end up, happily ever after if they are able to remarry. And Hollywood and the States would actually be a testament to that. No? So we also want the couples to settle their irreconcilable differences even before they take the marriage vows. Now, if divorce gets implemented, it's so much easier to take this for granted, right? So what we want the couples now to do is that they have to take marriage seriously. Like in any other contract, let's say in business contracts, right? You're going to review all of the stipulations before you even enter into it and make sure that you will be able to fulfill them. Okay? So, in sum, for my first part, before I turn you over to Attorney Joel, we want to protect the rights and the dignity of the human person. That's for sure. So, again, that's part of our call as compassionate Catholics. Number two, though, as we also want to protect the permanence of marriage for the sake of the common good. Because that was the point earlier on, a stable family or a stable family, the basic unit of society, will merit or will benefit the common good. Lastly, we want to address the current violation of rights, but keep in mind also the future of society, that we don't want it to just be, a proliferation of all these a la Hollywood marriages that we've seen earlier on. So how now do our current laws address these points? Let me turn you over to Attorney Joel.
Thank you, Chalette. Wow, very good sharing and informative points, insights shared by Chalette. So as Filipinos, I think we have to realize how fortunate we are with the kind of constitution that we currently have, our 1987 Philippine Constitution. If we look at the questions that are posed here by Chalette, we can say confidently that these are addressed already by our current laws, by the 1987 Philippine Constitution. The first thing that we find here is that we want our laws, not just the Constitution, but all other subsequent laws that will be passed, to protect the rights and dignity of the human person. Our Constitution, I think, is one of the few constitutions in the world that expressly recognize the dignity of the human person. In Article 2, it is stated that the state recognizes the dignity of every human person and guarantees full respect for human rights. Our laws recognize that we are persons with intellect, with will, with dignity that is far beyond anything in Philippine society, and that is to be protected at all costs by the state. And part of that dignity, that part of what the Constitution provides, is not just protects, rather, it's not just the persons, but also the institutions that each person enters into. Alam natin that as persons, we are sabi nga ng mga philosophers, we are social by nature. We cannot but interact with other persons. And the most natural interaction that man enters into is the institution of marriage. Marriage has been around even before states have come into existence. What the states and what the laws merely did was to recognize this human reality and to give it protection and to strengthen it as an institution. It is natural, it is inherent in us for man and woman to come together, to be one, and to form a family. And that is in accordance with our dignity, and that nature of marriage as being permanent is also recognized and protected by the state through our Constitution. That's why, with point number 2, we will see in our Constitution that it is expressly provided that marriage is an inviolable social institution. What does the word inviolable mean? It simply means that the institution of marriage is sacrosanct, that it cannot be infringed, it cannot be dishonored. Why? Because, again, marriage is not from the state. Marriage is not a creation of the state. It came from nature. And as Catholics, we know that it goes beyond nature, that ultimately marriage is an institution created by God, raised to the dignity of a sacrament. But we're not talking about that right now. We're looking at marriage as a natural institution, which our Constitution recognizes as an inviolable social institution. Sa wikang Filipino, ang kasal ay hindi maaaring sirain. Inviolable. And in constitutional interpretation, the first rule is that when reading the Constitution, we read the words in its plain and ordinary meaning, so that the legislators, the workers in government, and everyone else in Philippine society will be left with nothing else to do but to apply what the law says. And our Constitution categorically states that marriage is an inviolable social institution. Paulit-ulit po nating sabihin ito dahil ito po ay mahalagang panglaban natin sa mga nagpupush ng divorce law. Why? As we will see later on, divorce in itself is contrary to the nature of marriage as permanent. Because divorce is a legal measure, a mechanism through which the marital tie between a man and a woman is completely severed. Pinuputol, sinisira yung pag-uugnayan ng may asawa. At kung titignan natin and we look at it side by side with what the Constitution states, that marriage is an inviolable social institution, the most logical and I would say legally sound interpretation is for us to conclude that divorce is contrary to what our Constitution states with regard to marriage as an inviolable social institution. And then Chalette earlier mentioned that true, there are those who are victimized in their marriages. There are those who are abused. There are those who are hurt physically, sexually, emotionally. And we cannot turn a blind eye to these realities. And in fact, whenever they advocate for divorce, those are the things that they say. That divorce, if it's introduced in the country, will save the spouses from an irremediably broken marriage. That phrase, irremediably broken marriage, can actually be found in the proposed divorce bill. They also say that divorce will save the children from the harm that they receive of seeing their parents fight day in and day out. They say that divorce will save women from abusive husbands. And finally, they say that divorce provides for a second shot at marital bliss. because divorce allows for remarriage. However, when we go back to what Chelette mentioned a while ago, are these violations of rights, affronts to human dignity, already addressed by current laws? The answer is yes. When we talk about violence, violence against women, violence against those in abusive relationships, are there already laws that can be resorted to in order to remedy that situation? The answer is yes. We have Republic Act 9262, or the Violence Against Women and Children, in which a woman can get a temporary protection order against her husband, so that that cycle of abuse is stopped, okay, and no further acts of physical violence is inflicted against the woman. Let's say the problem is alcoholism. There are laws and there are many programs that provide for rehabilitation and other intervention programs that may be resorted to. To put it simply, if the problems presented by the pro-divorce advocates are these: save the spouses, save the children, save women, all of these can already be done and addressed without having to cut the marital ties, without having to destroy the marriage between a man and a woman. If the problem is violence, then let's address the violence. If the problem is alcoholism, then let's address the alcoholism without having to go against the nature of marriage, as we have recognized it since time immemorial, that it is permanent and that it is between a man and woman for the establishment of conjugal and family life. You see, part also of what we do in ALFI is to try to convince our legislators that all of these concerns that they bring up year in and year out can be addressed without having to destroy the institution of marriage. Kami po sa ALFI, pag mayroong mga pagdinig sa mababang kapulungan sa House of Representatives or the Senate, they usually ask us to attend. Personally, I've had the opportunity to present our position paper at least on 4 occasions, twice in the House of Representatives, twice in the Senate. In those first 3 instances in which we were asked to deliver our position papers, I noticed that the pro-family, pro-marriage advocates are always outnumbered. Kung mayroong 3 pro-family, we will find maybe 10 or 20 pro-divorce advocates. So personally, I just got used to the fact that we will be outnumbered in all of these congressional hearings, but we just tried to make ourselves confident with the fact that we have the truth on our side, and that hopefully the truth will still convince our legislators not to allow the divorce bill to pass. However, during this particular congressional hearing in the Senate, I think this was sometime September of last year, of the 19th Congress, this was, for me, the most memorable one yet. You know why? Because during this Senate hearing, we were the only group that showed up that voiced opposition against the divorce bill. One group as against maybe 20, 25, or even 30 groups who showed up clamoring for the passage of the divorce bill. In fact, when these pro-divorce advocates show up in the Senate, they make a show out of it. They come with their matching shirts, with placards, and then they cry in front of the camera, they get interviewed, so on and so forth. To the extent that at that time, this was 2018, they were saying that a majority of Filipinos now are pro-divorce. But thankfully, as pointed out by Chilette, in the most recent research, we've been able to bring that down to 48%. So maybe all of these things that we're doing, that Mike and your group are doing for family and life, maybe it's working. And we need to keep on talking about these issues, talking about the dangers of the divorce bill, in order to convince many, many more Filipinos of the dangers of having divorce in the country. So back to this congressional hearing that we were at. So the 30 groups that were there came from NGOs, came from government institutions even, and private individuals who just wanted to show up to voice their support for the divorce bill. And after this Senate hearing, the committee already endorsed the divorce bill for discussion in the plenary. Okay? So, before we move on, I'd like to give you an update with regard to where the divorce bill is right now. As we know, before a bill becomes a law here in the Philippines, it has to go through both houses of Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate. Okay? First, with regard to the House of Representatives, where is the divorce bill now? The divorce bill has been approved on third and final reading by the House of Representatives. This was the divorce bill that was voted upon back in May, in which they got the required number of votes to transmit it to the Senate. So in terms of the House of Representatives, yung ating pong mga congressman, tapos na po yung kanilang tungkulin patungkol sa divorce bill. So what they will do now is to wait for the other House of Congress, the Senate of the Philippines. Where is the divorce bill in the Senate of the Philippines? It is already done in the committee. Tapos na po yan. So now it is ripe to be discussed in the plenary, yung buong kabuuan po ng Senado. Because here, in the committee hearing, there were only 3 senators who attended, and only 3 senators who really pushed for it to be brought to the Senate plenary. So ngayon, nandoon na po yung divorce bill. It can now be calendared for discussions and interpellations in the Senate plenary, in which if they have enough numbers, they can actually vote divorce bill already, okay, and then just harmonize their version with the version of the House of Representatives, and then they can bring it to our President for his signature. Sige po.
Senate hearing.
And that, yes, sir.
You're the only group.
Yes.
Can I ask where was the church there? Or
That's a very good question, sir. That was also my question while I was looking at everyone and trying to look for a friendly and familiar face. After this hearing, it wasn't only you, actually, sir, who asked that question. Even Rafi Tulfo, during that hearing, asked that question. Where are the religious groups? And no one was able to answer. Okay? And I think because of the absence of the church, not just the Catholics, but also the evangelical groups, they wanted to schedule another hearing. But that never happened. So I think after that hearing, they already endorsed it for the plenary. But I talked to some of our friends who are also pro-family, pro-marriage advocates. And according to them, they think that attending these hearings won't do much. They say that instead of attending and giving their position papers, maybe the better strategy is to talk to the legislators personally, individually. Okay? That's also, I think, a good strategy, but I think it will really help our cause if more pro-marriage and pro-family groups actually take the time and the effort to go to the Senate or to the Congress show up and voice out the opposition to the divorce bill. Yes. So, in the House of Representatives, we're lucky that we have allies in Congress, such as Brother Eddie Villanueva, who we're able to work closely with and were able to give us information as to the movements of these bills. Same thing with the Senate. Senator Joel Villanueva, we're thankful that we have these evangelical members of Congress who are really pushing against the divorce bill. But maybe it's time for a Catholic, right, to be there and to be our friend in Congress or in the Senate. Because before we had Senator Tito Soto. I think for a time he said that as long as he was member of the Senate, he will not allow these bills to prosper. But anyway, and that's a very good point, sir, that you mentioned, that you pointed out, that there was this glaring absence of Catholic groups, of pro-marriage, pro-family groups in these hearings. And that's the reason why we're taking time to talk to many as possible, so that in the next Congress, and for sure they will refile the divorce bill, we can now show our numbers. We can now show that we actually care and we don't want the divorce bill to happen. Why? Because the thing with the Senate and the Congress right now is that they are pressed for time. They are about to adjourn, I think, by the end of this month. And then they will be very busy with the budget, with Alice Go, with Kiboloy and all of that, that some of them are saying that the divorce bill is not that much of a priority for this Congress. Because after October, anong mangyari sa October? Filing na ng certificates of candidacy. And then pag-resume, everyone will be busy campaigning in their particular areas. And then May elections, we will have a new set of congressmen and senators, a new Congress. So, although time right now is a little bit on our side, we know for sure, as Chalet said, that they will refile the divorce bill in the House of Representatives and the Senate come the start of the new Congress in June. So we have to be gearing up for that battle already beginning today. So hopefully, in the next hearing, be it in the House of Representatives or in the Senate, that we will see you with us, beside us, to deliver your position against the divorce bill. Yes.
On who's going to lead us, how we're going about going to rallies and Congress.
Yes.
We want to know.
Okay. Thank
because
you.
we have to be led. I mean, informations, this and that.
I think this group here, I think your family and life ministry can actually register to participate in a congressional hearing. We can help you, we can connect you with the committee that hears the divorce bill, and then they can invite you. You can go there with your position paper and then deliver it. And it's good, I think, for us to come together and to coalesce and to really show there that we are a united front. Just a bit of an update. Mike talked to me before about this. We invited him, I think, to join there's this group of anti-divorce, pro-family groups from different parishes, different dioceses that came together to attend the voting in the House of Representatives. They call themselves the Super Coalition Against Divorce. You may join that if you want, but you can also work on your own initiatives so that you can be present during the congressional hearings. But before I take your question, ma'am, but the point here is this, that we can't allow ourselves to be outnumbered anymore. This situation in which there was only one group cannot happen anymore. We don't have to form one group and then move as one, but at least we have to be talking to each other, communicating our plans so that in the next hearing, we can all be there and we can make our voices heard. Yes, ma'am.
We meet, right? We meet. Secretly now we meet. Another parish will meet again. Sometimes they don't hear us, Sometimes we have to be seen. To be seen meaning to say, for me, I will go to the streets. And I will, parang may procession tayo. Procession. Kasi there has to be an action eh. They are deaf. They're heartless. So we have to have action. That's what I mean.
Yes, I agree. And I hope that in these talks that we have, we always end with a call to action. We always come up with a concrete resolution that there's something that we will do. If there's an opportunity for us to do a rally or to, I don't know what, and if it's something, a congress maybe, a big seminar for everyone so that we're all well equipped to defend marriage in the family, I think that's something we can do.
Sorry.
Before I move on.
Maybe it's good to talk more about this. It's something to do with morals, divorce. And the one in charge of morality, obviously, is the church. Very clear. And there's this CBCP and Family Life Apostolate in the Archdiocese, headed by Father Jason, I guess. What's the plan? Do we interact with them, talk about this? Parang obviously, let's say, malaking talagang magagawa ng simbahan.
Yes.
Kasi, di ba? To help us unite. Especially if you talk about parishes. Simbahan it's not us. We cannot do anything with the parishes. We cannot unite parishes. Simbahan talaga. So, what's our plan to do these things?
Thank you po. Thank you. Actually, kami po sa Alfie, we try to work closely with the bishops, especially with Bishop Jesse Mercado. And our philosophy is that we take guidance from them. Okay, if they say that doing this thing is a good thing, then we do that. If they say that doing this thing is not so helpful to our cause, then we refrain from doing that. So I think as, wala na yata si Father, no? But our priests, our bishops should be there to guide us, to encourage us, to inspire us. Maybe they are there to help us, to allow us to use the venue of the church, etc. But I think much of the work, much of the heavy lifting has to be done by the laity. Tayo po ang dapat manguna sa laban na ito. Dun sa minention ko kanina na super coalition against a divorce, it was something like that. It was guided by the bishops, but they made it clear that it has to be a lay initiative and a largely lay movement, which I think is good. Because yung mga laiko, yun naman tayo naman yung mga kasal, di ba? Tayo naman yung nakakaranas ng mga ganitong bagay. And there's power in testimony of couples who went through hardships and yet flourished, of a woman who was a victim of infidelity but was able to forgive, etc. So these compelling testimonies and stories that us, the laity, can use in our advocacy, I think, is a powerful tool to convince everyone that we don't need a divorce bill in the Philippines, and then that what we need instead is to strengthen marriage as an institution, as it is already being strengthened and protected by our Constitution. Okay? Thank you so much for your questions and for your comments. Let's move on po with the presentation. So So kanina, no, siguro like what I mentioned a while ago, it's good to take comfort in the fact that the truth is not determined by a majority vote. Right now, the surveys are on our side, but who knows, maybe in 2 weeks, because of Rico Blanco and Maris Racal or whoever, sabi nila, dapat may divorce na. Tataas na naman yung number of people pro-divorce. But we know the truth. We know the truth about marriage, that the nature of marriage is this, that it is a comprehensive and total union between a man and a woman, and it is entered into for the lifelong pursuit of the good of the spouses. And then, that it has a particular purpose, the good of the spouses and the establishment of conjugal and family life. I like very much what Chalette said a while ago about the stability of marriage being the foundation of the stability of the family, and the stability of the family being the foundation of the stability of Philippine society. It's just like what Pope John Paul II said, as the family goes, so goes the nation, and so goes the world in which we live in. And that permanent nature of marriage, as I mentioned a while ago, is found in our Constitution, which stated explicitly that marriage is an inviolable social institution. This can also be found in our jurisprudence sa mga desisyon ng ating Korte Suprema, kung saan sinasabi that marriage is legally inviolable and that it cannot be terminated at the whim or the caprices of the parties. Because if we look at the divorce bill, that will be the effect. That now spouses can decide on their own to terminate the marriage without regard for the consequences that it has, which we will see later on. And then in the family code, consistent po yan. Constitution, desisyon ng ating Korte Suprema, yung ating mga batas, family code, sinasabi that marriage is a special contract of permanent union. Permanent, inviolable. Our laws have it correct. We were able to correctly encapsulate and recognize what marriage is in nature as a permanent union between a man and a woman. Okay? And this permanence of marriage is threatened by the mere presence of a divorce bill. What divorce does ultimately is to redefine marriage. How do we understand marriage now? And how have we understood marriage since time immemorial? One man, one woman, for life, for procreation. We look at the US, they have already re-engineered and changed this definition. Marriage for them, is it still one man and one woman? No more. Marriage for them, is it still for life? No more. Marriage for them, is it still for procreation? No more. There's this phenomenon called the DINK. Alam niyo po ba yun? D-I-N-K. Double income, no kids. And that's what they want for couples. To accumulate as many stuff and as many cute dogs as possible, and then not to have children. So they have now changed marriage into something completely different, something completely different from how it is as designed by nature and ultimately as designed by God. And we know that we have no authority to do that, to tamper with how marriage was designed to begin with. And so let's now answer this question. What is divorce? Okay? What is this thing that we're trying to fight against? So divorce is a decree by a court that a valid marriage no longer exists for causes that may have developed after the marriage celebration. The marriage bond is dissolved. Both parties are free to remarry. So in divorce, there is a valid marriage. There are valid marital ties between the husband and the wife, and that marital tie is completely terminated, completely severed. Yan ang epekto ng divorce. There was a marriage, and then that marriage is cut off. That marriage is terminated. And already at this point, we see how that is contrary to what the nature of marriage is, and as we have recognized it since time immemorial, that marriage is permanent, inviolable. Okay? But that is what they want introduced in our legal system. A way to end marriages essentially at the will of the parties. How is this different? How is this done? Okay? Narinig natin that there is this thing called a no-fault divorce. And that is the kind of divorce bill that they are introducing in our country. That is from Senator Risa Hontiveros herself. That's what she said. That what they are pushing for is a no-fault divorce, in which we don't have to prove anything as long as there is that basis. Irreconcilable difference. In the early versions of the divorce bill, it's quite interesting that they actually did not define irreconcilable difference. Usually po, pag may batas at kung may mga salitang ginagamit doon, nagbibigay sila ng definition. But in the early versions of the divorce bill, there was no definition of irreconcilable differences. What does that mean? It means that this can be defined and determined by the parties themselves. All they have to do is to get a judge to agree with them. They go to the court and they say, oh, we have irreconcilable differences. They prove some form of irreconcilable difference, and if they're able to convince a judge, then their marriage is terminated. And this is what happens in the US. That's why 60% of marriages end in divorce, 70% for second marriages, so on and so forth. We have situations in which there are mixed families na kasama yung stepdad, yung stepmom, so on and so forth. And by the way, in these situations, there are many crimes that happen. Kasi yung stepdad living with a girl, diba, who's not related by blood, all crazy things can happen. And we don't want that. Because again, what is the idea, the nature of marriage? Permanent and something that has sanctity. That cannot be toyed with, it cannot be taken lightly. So that is a no-fault divorce, and that is the kind of divorce that they want here in the Philippines. Sometimes we also hear, diba, instead of divorce, annulment na lang. What is the difference between divorce and annulment? Okay? Again, with divorce, there is a valid marriage, and then that marriage is terminated. The marital ties are severed. Pinuputol yung ugnayan ng may asawa. Mahalagang maintindihan po natin that if we're talking about a divorce, we're talking about a situation in which there was a valid marriage. That is not the case with annulment. The more accurate term really is the declaration of nullity of marriage. Anong ibig sabihin niyan? Ang ibig sabihin nito, idinideklara ng hukuman na walang kasal na naganap. There was no marriage to begin with. The marriage was void ab initio from the very beginning. No marriage happened. And what the court does is to look at facts and circumstances in the marriage, in the consent, in the authority of the solemnizing officer, in the knowledge of the party, so on and so forth. If there's if something there is lacking, the court will decide, oops, 16 years old yung lalaki, yung babae, walang kapasidad to give consent. There was no marriage to begin with. What is declared is that fact, that there was no marriage to begin with. Question, in a declaration of nullity or annulment, are there marital ties that are severed? may pinuputol bang ugnayan ng kasal? What's the answer? In an annulment or declaration of nullity, is there a marriage that is terminated? Yes or no? No, because there was no marriage to begin with. What the courts merely do is to recognize that fact. That is completely different with divorce. In divorce, was there a marriage? Yes. And what divorce does is to cut off the marital ties and to terminate that marriage. And this declaration of nullity of a marriage is in fact a creation of canon law, which was merely adopted by our family code. In fact, the canon law provisions provide for more grounds for the declaration of nullity, because I think the church understands that if there was no marriage solemnized by the priest, recognized by God, then there's no reason to keep them together. But we hear that what God has put together, let no man put us under. In the same way, what God did not put together, let's not keep them together. Right? So, in the declaration of nullity, the church looks at the question whether or not there was marriage to begin with. If there was a marriage, then the church cannot touch that, because the church's teaching on marriage is clear that it is for life. Now, divorce does something different. For divorce, it doesn't matter, okay? As long as the grounds are there, they will cut off that marriage. What are the grounds in the current version of the bill? Before we go to the grounds, yung House Bill 9349 or the Absolute Divorce Act, this was the one passed by our legislators last May. And in their Declaration of Principles, parang explanatory note nila, ito yung mga nakalagay. Parang the explanatory note serves like a preview of what one will find in the law. Okay? In the House Bill, Absolute Divorce Act, it says there that marriage as a social institution and as the foundation of the family. If we read that sentence, ano yung kulang na matatagpuan natin dapat sa Constitution? They conveniently omitted the word inviolable. We look at the bill, and that's all that they say, that marriage as a social institution and as the foundation of the family. They removed that very important word, inviolable, because they know in their heart of hearts, I'm sure, they know that there's no arguing against what the clear words of the Constitution are, that marriage is an inviolable social institution. And then they say that divorce will be an alternative mode for the dissolution of an irreparably broken or dysfunctional marriage. But that's not really true. You know why? Because I'm quite sure that if divorce is introduced in the Philippines, all the other remedies will slowly fade into the nothingness. Mawawala na po yan. Yung psychological incapacity, yung legal separation, they will not use that anymore because the grounds for legal separation and the annulment are also included in the divorce bill. In divorce. So kung may divorce na, bakit pa magkakaroon ng, o bakit pagagamitin yung legal separation at annulment? Under limited grounds daw. But as we will see later on, the divorce bill incorporates all the grounds of legal separation, annulment, some grounds of vowsy, psychological incapacity, so on and so forth. It is an encompassing divorce bill that includes so many grounds, including irreconcilable differences. And of course, I think this is one of their selling points that divorce will give a person the freedom, the chance to find a second shot at marital bliss. But as Gillette mentioned a while ago, and as I'm sure all of you know, marriage is not all about happiness. Tama ba? Are you happy? Diba? I'm sure you know, those of you who have been married. Ako po, I'm about to get married November 30. So sana December 1, against divorce pa rin ako. Just joking. But I'm sure that you know this. I'm sure that you know this. That marriage is not just about happiness. Because we're talking about the good of the other spouse. And it's not always happy pursuing the good of the other spouse. Because what if the good of the other spouse is to do treatment, and then because of that treatment, there can't be sexual intimacy. A person cannot insist, diba? Something like that. So what if the good of the spouse is to allow that spouse to study abroad, so on and so forth? There are many, many other considerations in marriage other than happiness. Okay? So what are the grounds for absolute divorce? As mentioned, the grounds for legal separation, these include physical violence, alcoholism, infidelity, so separation, in fact, etc. And then the grounds for annulment, if there's a defect in the marriage license, defect in the consent, defect in the solemnizing officer, etc. And then separation, in fact, for 5 years. And reconciliation is highly improbable. So one has to do now, if there's a divorce bill, divorce law, is to stay away from one spouse for 5 years. Wait it out for 5 years, and then you get a divorce. What happens, again, to that inviolability of marriage, to that marriage as an institution that has sanctity? These words, inviolability, sanctity, these are not from the Bible. These are from our 1987 Philippine Constitution. And yet we have a bill that introduces all of these things. Psychological incapacity. Okay? Let's try to talk about this a little bit. So psychological incapacity is the incapability of a husband or a wife to understand and to perform the essential obligations of marriage. In other words, in a very simple manner, okay? Pumasok siya sa kasal, hindi niya alam kung ano yung kanyang pinapasok. There's something in his or her there's a psychic condition that makes that person incapable of understanding and subsequently complying with the essential marital obligation. Napakaraming halimbawa po nito sa ating mga jurisprudence. Isang lalaki na ayaw makipagtalik sa kanyang asawa ng many years. Okay? Dahil parang natatakot siya, nandidiri siya, etc. That is symptomatic of psychological incapacity. Halimbawa, isang lalaki na laging lasing, hindi umuuwi. Pag umuuwi, punching bag yung asawa, that can be psychological incapacity. So it goes deep into the mind, the psyche of the person, that he or she is incapable of comprehending the essential marital obligations. In the current laws, that psychological incapacity must be present at the time the marriage was celebrated. But here, in the divorce bill, they're saying that that psychological incapacity can happen even after the marriage was celebrated. And then we have sex reassignment surgery or transition from one sex to another. Again, this is quite cunning, I would say, that they included this ground. Because here, not only do they want to espouse the redefinition of marriage, they also want to espouse the redefinition of man. Because by including that as a ground, they are implicitly recognizing that a man can become a woman. Right? And that a woman can become a man. So kung yung asawa mo, isang araw, babae na, o lalaki na, pwede nyo nang sirain yung inyong kasal because that person has already changed his or her sex. And then yung irreconcilable differences, which can really mean anything, and other forms of domestic or marital abuse. So what we have here is a piece of proposed legislation that will make obtaining a divorce easy, especially if we take into consideration the fact that this will be, this is summary in nature, summary judicial proceedings, meaning kahit po walang full-blown trial na mangyayari, maaaring magkaroon ng divorce ang isang mag-asawa. They can simply file their pleadings, their papers before the court. The judge can already decide to terminate a marriage. I'm sure if there is a divorce, it will be quick and it will not be as extensive and exhaustive as the hearings about Alice Guo and everyone else that their senators are spending many hours on. But here what we're talking about is something of far greater importance, the foundation of society, which is marriage, supposed to be permanent. So ultimately, marriage, if it is allowed to be terminated at will by the parties, will lead to the disintegration of the family. It will remove that disposition of spouses that when they go into a marriage, they are going there for life. Diba? Right now, that's my disposition as a person about to be married. I'm about to marry and I'll be in that marriage until I breathe my last. But here, persons will now, if there's a divorce law already, persons will be going to marriage knowing that there is a possible way out. It changes what they bring into the marriage because they know that if things don't go the way they want, they can always get a divorce. So it not only changes the stability of the marriage and of the family, it also changes the stability of the person. And you, yung ikaw, no, yung asawa mo, how now you will always be second guessing and asking yourself, will this person not divorce me? Okay? If I suddenly change my hairstyle or if I suddenly start listening to Beanie instead of SB19, something like that. So it makes marriage not as stable as nature wanted it to be. And then it leads to high divorce rates and it damages the family and complicates family life. We don't want what happens in other countries to happen in the Philippines, in which families are hard to recognize anymore because they're bringing in children from their second marriage, third marriage, their husband is friends with their ex-husband. It's just stranger than fiction, which we don't want to have as reality in the Philippines. And lastly, we have to keep in mind that those who suffer the most in a divorce are the children. There are many studies, and Alfie can provide this for you as you prepare your own position papers and as we all get ready to meet each other in the Congress or in the House. There are many studies that there are many detrimental effects on children. Number one is loss of parental contact. If mother and father are no longer together, the likelihood is high that the children will no longer be in constant communication with the other spouse once there's a divorce. In fact, I think only 39% of children keep in contact with the other spouse after a divorce. And then children will have to go through the pain of seeing their parents separate, of coming home and then not knowing when the divorce decree will be finalized, not knowing when their last meal as one complete family will be. It really damages them, and that leads to poor academic performance, mental health issues, and then increased risk of being engaged in drug, alcohol, and sexual abuse. And this perpetuates a cycle of divorce. There are many children of divorce who end up getting divorced themselves. It leads to a society that is just in disarray. And we don't want that because, again, what does our Constitution say? I keep talking about the Constitution not just because it's my profession, but really the Constitution is not just a legal document. It also expresses who we are as a Filipino society. That for us, Filipinos, we believe in a God. It's in our preamble. We, the sovereign Filipino peoples, imploring the aid of Almighty God. That for us Filipinos, going back to what Shalette mentioned, we recognize human dignity and we guarantee full respect for human rights. And as Filipinos, for us, marriage is not just any other relationship, but it is one that is of permanent union, one that has sanctity, that the state has to protect and strengthen, and then one that is of inviolable nature. So these are the things that we want to fight for and that we want to protect and preserve in our society. So what can we do? I think we have to continue proclaiming the truth about marriage. Let's talk about it. Let's educate persons within our circles of influence. And then, of course, we have to, I think, for me, in the future, to be more faithful to the call to the married life. And then to pray for our legislators. Pray that in the next elections, we vote legislators who we know will be on us in this fight. Sometimes it's disheartening to see many Catholics campaign all out for a certain individual, and then if you look at that individual and his or her platforms, pro-divorce, pro-death penalty, pro-same-sex marriage, pro-SOGI. So hopefully we're enlightened when we select our legislators. And then lastly, be involved. And I think this addresses your concerns. We need to be there. We need to show up and we need to let our voices be heard. Thank you so much, and I turn you over to Eileen.
Yes. All right. Yes.
I have a friend who is really, I'll make it very short. I have a friend who's really leaving her marriage even if her husband says, she's been waiting for her husband for already 15 years to leave his lustful relationship with young women. Up to now, she's already 63. She's still waiting for her husband to be converted. She's suffering. But said, I'm not going to leave, not going to have annulment because there's no annulment on that case, I think. Kahit na ilang babae na yung asawa niya, no, hindi pa naman nakakabuntis, no. But from one girl to another girl to another girl. I wanted to help. I don't know how. I've been waiting how to help. Kahit na ata ilang diploma na natapos ko, hindi ko matulungan.
Maybe I can try to cover that in this last few slides, because we're really now at the tail end of our presentation, and hopefully this is where we really get into more in action mode and get into creative thinking, and whether we as lay, not we as church, but we as lay, take the lead. And I think just as we consult people who are in the Senate and in Congress, they're saying most of our lawmakers don't really go very right, which is the church. They don't go very left, which is the Gabrielas. They try to be center, to be, more, to cover more ground. And that's really us lay people. So it's a story and it's a fight for us lay. And just to, when we introduced Alfie, while we are all Catholics and really practicing Catholics, we stand as lay, not part of the church. So most of our story in our position paper, we do not quote from the Bible. We do not. And it's also not very helpful. Just to let you know, it's not very helpful for congressmen to put, quotes from the Bible there, because what they want is for us to go there with a position citing specific phrases in the bill that we are questioning. So, go straight and direct. So that's really the approach. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for this. This question for attorney. Will profile of lawmakers help, like, profile of Congressman 1, Congressman 2, senators, divorce, having so many women? Will that help that we make a profile?
Actually, you have, I think we are fortunate.
We're just by chismis lang.
No, we are
Marites.
fortunate because we know the 109 who voted against the divorce. So that's already a starting point. And you check whether your congressman in your area is part of the 109.
Okay, but lay people, we don't have this access. We're not capable of knowing, this congressman.
You can write them. We can talk about some of the action. Yeah. So anyway, what I'd like to do now is talk about some key takeaways, summarizing their points, but also trying to trigger and incite you to take greater action and join us, really join us. What do I click here? This one. So key takeaways. What can we do to help society heal? And we have stated, so we have to be involved. Diba? That was the last point of Joel. We have to be involved. We have to be part of the discussion. And we have to change the conversation so that it's not always about divorce. Kasi yun ang nangyayari. Every Congress, divorce lang eh. Parang divorce lang is the only bill filed to help these ailing marriages. But we said, it's not the only solution we can think of. So, I think we have, that's why even kami sa Alfie, we were saying, surely in the 20th Congress, it's going to be filed again. And the only way to pull the rug under the divorce bill is to file alternative bills and change the drift of the discussion. But we need our minds our thinking caps on, and we have to be a bit more creative. And that's why we agree always to give these talks, because we really need the people out there, marriage counselors, those who give pre-Cana, those who are, helping marriages, to really come together. Family lawyers have to come together and help us think of a solution that is win-win. It works with our Constitution, but it also helps the issue of these victims, where there's a violation of human dignity. So, again, we will review, diba? We cannot just be bystanders in this. So, we have to be clear on the end in mind. Again, it's the first statement. It's not a fight against divorce. It's a fight to help and protect the violation of human dignity that's happening in some of these marriages within the confines of respecting and upholding the permanence of marriage. Non-negotiable. Diba? We have to know our non-negotiables. Diba? When you solve the problem, you have to begin with the end in mind. So these are the non-negotiables we have. And of course, we may not be able to solve all troubled marriages, but at the end of the day, the third point, we also want to hold people accountable. Because they enter the marriage freely. And we also have to teach them to live by the choices that they make. Diba? And somehow, by saying divorce, and I can just kill, parang you're excusing people na nagkamali ka eh. Diba? So there's a little bit of panindigan mo yung decision mo. And not later on regret. Diba? Yung, ano yung sinasabi, ang kasali, hindi yung parang kanin na pag napaso, pwedeng is that correct? Iluwa, diba? Hindi ganon, diba? And also, and let's not forget, no? Let's not just think of the marriages now. Let's think of couples who are entering marriage. Because remember the chart that Chilette showed, annulment cases on the rise. Ibig sabihin, may pagkakamali sila sa pagpasok sa marriage. So that means perhaps there's also a law, an action we can take to help couples discern better before they choose their life, when they're choosing their lifetime partner in marriage. So, ang daming pwede pa nating gawin. Hindi lang tataloy ka kagad sa divorce. Yun ang nangyayari ngayon. Alfie started when the divorce bill was first filed, I think, in the 11th Congress. So that was more than 20 years ago. Kaya nabuhay ang Alfie because of the divorce bill. So up to today, so we were saying, ay, siguro naman we're doing our work well kasi hindi pa rin napapasa. Buti na lang. So we're asking, is there an alternative bill? Could there be an alternative bill to divorce? First, a bill that frees the aggrieved from a dangerous and toxic relationship more swiftly and less costly. Kasi yun ang sinasabi ng mga kalaban. It's too expensive. Annulment is too expensive. You have to go through a psych test, etc. So, pag-aralan natin, how do you make it more efficient, more effective, so that it works without too much expense on the part of the couple going through. Di ba may action na tayo pwede natin pag-isipan? Second, it also, can we expand the grounds for declaration of nullity or legal separation or annulment? Just to make sure, review natin ulit, just to make sure that all the grounds that they're thinking of, kaya gusto nila ng divorce, na valid grounds are already included. Just to check one, because there are new developments like this, yun na nga, yung sexual assignment surgery, reassignment surgery. Well, that wasn't there when they started drafting the Constitution or the Family Code. I mean, that was unheard of. Now it's there. So, can that be covered? So, that's also something that we have to study. And even unresolved addiction, abandonment, abuse, we have to make sure that it covers all sorts of abuse, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, even this serial infidelity. I think the example of Malu is a case of serial infidelity. But I wonder, can that not be traced to a psychic? That's a sort of addiction eh. That's a kind of addiction. And I don't know, I've been exposed and I've worked with quite a big rehab center. And most of these addicts, actually, if they go through their journal, almost 100%, they can trace it back. All addiction is traced back to a trauma in childhood. And I would think serial infidelity is also a form of addiction. If you study the case, genealogy of that issue, I'm sure that can be traced all the way back to childhood. And perhaps it could lead to questioning the validity of their marriage in the first place. But all of this, can there be an alternative bill? And we still need to uphold the preeminent status of a valid marriage. And I put here in bold, a valid marriage, which we know is an inviolable social institution. But question, are all these toxic marriages valid? We're assuming that they're all valid. But you know, personally, I've also interviewed certain marriage counselors, and I think there are marriage counselors here. And you know what they told me? They said, you know, Eileen, most of the cases who come to me, when I really review them, marami sa kanila hindi valid. Really may problema sa consent. Sabi ko, ganun ba? Sabi, yeah. You just have to study the case deeply, and many of them, so umpisa pa lang, boyfriend, girlfriend pa lang nila, andun na yung signs of the problem. siguro hindi lang nila masyadong pinansin or pinag-aralan. So, sabi niya, many of them, so I said, so actually, many of them are actually declaration of nullity. Sabi niya, yeah, that was based on a few. Of course, it's not statistically significant. This is not a wide test, but this is really through interviews we've done with marriage counselors. And I talk about a very valid marriage. And I go back to a certain basic knowledge of what makes a valid marriage. What makes a valid marriage? Marriage is based on the free consent. The free consent of the man and the woman celebrating the sacrament or the marriage. The parties enter into the covenant of matrimony must want to give themselves to each other mutually and definitively in order to live a covenant of faithful and fruitful love. So, it's the consent that makes the marriage. You know, in the ceremony, whether it's a Catholic or religious or even civil ceremony, the most important part, it's not the marcha, it's not all of, it's really, diba, you ask them, do you take, diba? Do you take this person to be your lawfully wedded spouse or wife or husband or wife, to have and to hold, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do you part. And then the person has to say and declare to at least 2 witnesses the I do. That seals the marriage. That alone is what seals the marriage. It's the consent more than anything else that makes the marriage. And we have to keep that in mind. We have to keep that in mind. Why? Because if there is a defect in the consent, and I would even say a grave defect in that consent, then it is a basic ground for declaring the marriage invalid. Understand? If there's a grave defect. What kind of defect? And just a little bit, when you give a consent, we are human beings. It's always an act of the intellect, an act of the will. Ibig sabihin, pag pumayag ka, I do. Ibig sabihin na pag-isipan ko ng maigi. I thought about it well and I'm of the right mind and maturity to think about it. That's why not everybody, right, diba, there's an age, minimum age. Because below that, you probably cannot think straight or properly about the obligations of marriage and what marriage is. So it requires and it assumes that that person understands marriage and understands the obligation. Intellect. Importante yon sa consent. The second is will. Freely. Buong-buo sa kalooban. Fully, I'm saying I want to marry this person here and now. That's what, now hindi ako pinilit. Hindi siya shotgun marriage. I don't have a gun behind me. I came here on my own accord. Yun yung an act of the will. So pwede din may defect doon. So there could be a defect in the knowledge. Bakit? Or a defect in the will. Ano yung mga defects? And probably you hear about these situations. When you think about it, baka naman declaration of nullity yan. Example, I got married, yung defect of the will, mali ang dahilan. I got married kasi 38 na ako eh. Diba? Boyfriend-girlfriend na kami, 5 years na kami, 38 na ako, my body clock is already ticking, I want to have a kid, game na. That's not the right reason you marry a person. And even if you say 5 years na kaming boyfriend-girlfriend, ibang asawa, ibang boyfriend. Diba? Ibang asawa, ibang boyfriend. So, sometimes there is a defect. Or there could be fraud, or you did not, or there could be stress or fear, like nabuntis ako eh. Nabuntis. Magagalit si parents. Nakakahiya sa barangay. Diba? And there's nothing. What's going to happen to me? Nobody's going to marry me if I'm pregnant. So yes, I will agree to marry this person. Wrong reason. That's not the right consent. So you'll wonder, isn't that an invalid marriage? And how many marriages do you know of your friends, people that you know, who got married because they were pregnant? Now you'd wonder, hindi ba invalid yun? Or sometimes they think, so there are so many other reasons, or let's say mahirap yung babae, or very oppressive yung kanyang tatay, it's a very oppressive, toxic household that she is, and now she meets this boy who is rich. He will be my savior. It will move me out of poverty. I will marry him because of the comfort of the financial comfort that he can provide. Wrong reason. So again, so there are many instances wherein there is a defect in the quality of the consent, whether intellectually or the will. So you would wonder, so kailangan, I'm not saying all of these cases are, so you have to prove and really go through the motion of proving that there's a grave defect. I think the example of Ms. Malu, diba, of serial infidelity, na you, as I said, you would wonder, how can that not come from a childhood trauma? Diba? Addiction to sex. How can that not come from a childhood? I mean, the psychologist there will tell you, there is always something that begins. It cannot just be na nangyari na lang na matanda na siya, doon na lang siya nag-ano. It always comes from a childhood trauma. So there are so many instances that we can study within the confines of the law. I think it has enough scope to prove that many of these troubled relationships that Risa Ontiveros wants to address can already be covered because it will prove that there is a defect. We just have to be more masipag, diba? Go through the motion, go through the, you know, perhaps it's tedious, but we have to do that to prove that there's a defect in the consent. And that could be a ground for declaring the marriage as invalid. And yun na nga, what God has not put together, we must asunder. We must asunder because they don't belong to each other. Ibig sabihin, di ba? Huwag natin pilitin. So that's about marriage. What about those entering the marriage? And this is something that we've never had a conversation about this. But this thing about improving the quality of pre-K na, well, that's in the Catholic, but the pre-marriage seminar. I think that's a requirement before you get a marriage certificate, di ba? You have to attend a pre-marriage seminar. But I think it's only half day. And I think it's practically family planning and responsible parenthood ang topic for half a day. So we said, but there are so many other topics. There's so many other topics. As we know, some of you give pre-K na. Some are 1 day, some are 2 days. Discovery weekend is 3 days, 2 nights, di ba? And they go through, but what are the important topics? We have to discuss what is marriage. You have to explain to them. Ito yung marriage. Ito yung obligations nyo. Ito yung responsibility. You have to talk about what is love. Love is doing the good for the other. Talk about love languages. There are so many other topics that perhaps are not covered in a half-day pre-marriage seminar. Even things like communication and money matters, particularly money matters. Again, marriage counselors would often say, and I've spoken to a family lawyer, she said, they don't understand, many of these couples don't understand the meaning of a conjugal regime. Hindi nila alam. They think that, I earn this money, this is mine. You earn that money, this is yours. So parang hindi. They have to think that every single peso they earn is not theirs anymore. It belongs, it's a conjugal, it's part of the conjugal regime. But we have to teach them that. Because it becomes, it's one of the, apart from infidelity, it's one of the common causes of fights, broken marriages, discussions, fights between the couple, arguments between them. It's always about money. Diba? And other things like virtues in marriage, fidelity, self-giving. Marriage is about the other-centeredness. It's an other-centeredness thing, diba? You enter into it giving 100%. It's not 50-50. It's 100, regardless of whether the spouse gives 100, 80, 50. Basta ikaw lang, you give 100. And in fact, if the spouse gives 80, you give 120. Do people get it? Do people in this generation understand that that's what's demanded of them within a marriage? And if they don't, do they understand, therefore? Is their consent really clear when they said yes to marriage? Baka hindi, di ba? So we have to explain this also and think about, can we expand the quality and improve the quality of the pre-marriage seminar given by the government. Because I think only 50% of marriages are in a religious or church, whether Catholic or Protestant. The rest are all civil. So hindi natin nasasakop the other half of the marriages that are just getting into the half-day seminar. So we should also, di ba? Pope Francis, Amoris Laetitia, we have to accompany people. And on our own, without having big groups, on our own, as a parent, as a lola, as a tita, we can accompany people, those entering marriage, help them understand the demands of self-giving, and help them see their fiancé. Just because boyfriend mo yan or girlfriend mo yan, life partner mo yan, iba yung qualities for a life partner than a boyfriend or a girlfriend. So you help them see that and ask them the provocative questions to force them to choose their mate properly. Ako nga, I would ask my son, what if anything happens to your girlfriend and she becomes like Christopher Reeve? Will you stay with her forever? Diba? Christopher Reeve became, he became paralyzed, etc. God forbid. But I just had to ask that question to force, you would have to live with her forever. That's what it means. So when he says yes, I okay. So you know that it's not always a bed of roses. We also have to accompany people, of course, going through or moving forward from a declaration of nullity, or even when they have rocky marriages, we have to sit with them, chat with them, provide a listening ear, and just be there for them. Perhaps we may not be the best person to advise them legally, but it's always good to know that they have a friend that they can rely on. And that's really what Pope Francis is also pushing us, accompaniment for these types of individuals and people. And lastly, again, just to echo what Chilette and Joel has said, it's really, marriage is for the good of society. Diba? So this second chance at happiness, your happiness ends when it compromises the happiness of somebody else. And this thing, divorce, will compromise the happiness and the good of the bigger, the common good, which is the good of society. And we cannot allow that to happen. Diba? It's really there for the human race. It was there when the first family came into this world, andun na yung marriage. And the ends of marriage is also for the procreation and education of children. So how can we not fight for a permanent marriage when that's the very thing that guarantees or helps support, is a foundation of, it's really there for the well-being of children. How can we not fight for the permanence of marriage? So the state, therefore, has to support. It has to support and help strengthen marriage. A strong marriage is the best foundation to build stable families. It's not a guarantee, but it's already the foundation that you can work on to build your stable family. And with stable families, that's one way of securing a strong and stable society as well. So there, I end with these thoughts. Hopefully, you've learned a lot, that you've been enlightened with what we have shared, but we really enjoin you to, join Alfie and share the stories and actually the stories of successful marriages. And there are successful marriages, despite, let's say, the infidelity that happens. Some really say, no, I'm sticking to my vow. They've learned to forgive. They've learned to move on. And they have found happiness. Diba? Giving their marriage a second chance might be the better option to find happiness. So there, thank you very much, and have a pleasant afternoon. Whatever left of it, yes.
Yeah, sorry, I'm always asking questions, but I'm quite involved with the pre-Cana. That's why it might be of help if I share something. My experience of pre-Cana is that the couples who are taking the pre-Cana is just to conform. They're not really listening so much kasi they want to get married. Kailangan to go into a pre-Cana seminar so that the priest can sign. So conform lang. Sometimes they're not listening. For some, if the process of the pre-Cana is good, then there's such thing as what we do. We go into genogram. Is to take about 3 generations of each and every one with developmental and situational development of each person. Tatlong generation. But if they found out na, oh, problema to, pinasukan ko, may problema yung about to, paano na to? So we become responsible. Pag tinigil yung wedding, bayad na yung caterer, yung simbahan, nag-down payment, paano tayo? Baka we get sued pa. They get separated because of us. It becomes a problem. So sometimes we would say a pre-Cana is a seminar too late. It's just to confirm. It's too late. No? A good seminar is something like Discovery Weekend. It's not about wedding. It's about knowing each other or courtship pattern, whether you'll find the right person or not. So I would suggest that's a better one. You're with your partner, you study. Kasi in genogram, we'll see your 3 generations. It will, bring out the behavioral pattern, speech pattern, communication, addiction. It's generational. Sometimes you don't know whom you're marrying. And that guy whom you're carrying.
I think in the Discovery Weekend, they even they do a questionnaire.
Kaya nga, they're good. But sometimes you open a can of worm, you cannot cover. Patay na. Ang kakagulo. Things like, I think courtship pa lang, we should encourage a program like that. Oh, just yun. Yung kasi the talk usually in the archdiocese, personhood, communication, marriage as a sacrament, no? Even yung planning, birth planning, and this, parang planning of that. Nandyan, pero medyo too late. Yun lang, I just wanna contribute to this program.
I think, excuse me, this is very important. I think the priest in the canonical interview can also a little bit detect with the help of the Holy Spirit whether they're really meant for each other. But the thing is, before the canonical interview, there's already the caterer, the gown, and everything are already involved. Anyway, thank you. Talagang mahirap.
Hello. No, I just wanted to share my experience when I joined the Discovery Weekend. I did it when my husband proposed to me. So, yes. So when we joined that weekend, we were the only ones who were not engaged. Everybody else was engaged because for me it was very important that we discuss these major issues before even deciding to get married. And this one was given by Father David Clay years ago. So I think it was called Retrobi. It was very good. But even still, I feel that you do discuss these things, but you're also in a rush because you're already thinking of whether you're going to get married or not. And then it takes like 6 months minimum to prepare for the wedding. But what I was so scared about was breaking an engagement. So for me, it was better to split up with my boyfriend versus break an engagement because at that point, the two families are involved and there's more pressure. Now, what I find really lacking is just seminars for couples intending to get married. And seminars that are not necessarily inviting the two, because usually one person may not want. Like for example, I'm involved with a group who are giving couple retreats, okay, to married couples. And even now, it's like sometimes the husband doesn't want, or they don't want. So you can't get the two people to go. And when you can't get the two people to go, the person who wants to go is also deprived of the information, okay? So let's say, looking back at people who want to get married, there's just so many things that they do not know. And it's like bulaga na lang when you get married. And then suddenly it's like they have expectations, mga 5 or 7 years down the line, and that's when marriages break up. Because all these false expectations that they had, nobody ever discussed with them before, suddenly it's like, oh my gosh. They don't realize that money matters are such a big cause of breakups. Because men and women now have a different idea of what their role is in a marriage. Women are very feminist. They want their freedom and they want to do their thing. They don't realize that they have duties in their marriage. And then men naman, they say, okay, the women, they want to do all of this, then we don't really need to be a provider, or we don't, so they also go in na parang play house lang. So I think that if you could invite, even have, let's say, as part of the pre-Cana program, just inviting separate talks for women and for men. Completely separate talks. No, it's like they can join it privately. They don't need to bring their boyfriend, or because then they'll say, oh, the girl will feel like, okay, I'm pressuring my boyfriend to propose to me, or vice versa, right? I'm pressuring this girl by attending talks together. So you don't necessarily, there are couples that may want to attend talks together, and that would be, really discussing things like communication, the financial issues, what is important psychologically for women. Like for women, it's important to feel, safe in a marriage. And even if they're feminists, in the end, they're gonna complain. Ay nako, my husband is so whatever, right? They're not like me or whatever, right? So, but then you get carried away with all these expectations of being a superwoman also. You don't realize, later down the line, when you are burdened with, you have to take care of your kids. You have to do all these other duties. You have to take care of your home. You can't just say, no, I'm working and iiwanan yan, and who's going to be in charge of that, right? So if you want to have a marriage that, well, you get your cake and eat it too, right? Meaning this modern day marriage, you really have to discuss it and say, okay, we want this quality of life, and something like as basic as budgeting. Like, if you're going to get married, you have to discuss these things. Where are we going to live? Do we have even enough money? Do you want these responsibilities? Because if you don't get married. Like a lot of men. You want this, but you don't naman know how you're going to support your family, or you think, it's not really my duty. It's because we're both in it now. You earn, I earn. So these things have to be discussed. So maybe something like that, just really, in fact, even those who are involved in Singles for Christ, I don't know how much preparation they have for marriage. They're all looking for a spouse, right? They're hoping it's going to be a good Catholic spouse. But even good Catholic spouses don't know what marriage entails. So, that would be my suggestion for the pre-Cana, because the pre-Cana itself is really, it's just a requirement to get married. And some don't even know what they took up there. They didn't even take it seriously. They just did it because kailangan isign ito. So for those, at least help save the marriages of those who are serious about marriage. But due to lack of information, lack of training, they don't get the information. And they get into this, with all these misconceptions. And then when they're there, too late. Anyway, that's my opinion.
Actually, the good thing is to bring that up. I know it's pre-K na and it's very Catholic, it's very parish-based, but we have to really help all marriages, and hopefully there's a way that it can be packaged so that even if I'm not Catholic, I can feel I can go there and learn from it. Kasi nga, all marriages have to be involved to be covered. I mean, all couples. And siguro nga, it should even start when they're as early as, siguro grade 12, di ba? Grade 12, ilan taon na yan? 16, 18, di ba? That's when they're already looking, and many of our, and this is many of our the youth these days, they think marriage is a ticket out of poverty. It's a ticket to, because they live, parang I'm in the dump here in my family, so I might as well take the chance with somebody else. Ganun yung concept nila eh. So, again, we have to correct that as early as possible, to your point. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
Am I so talkative, no? But I think it's good to talk, like what you did. It's good to talk. But I have no solution yet with my friend. Isn't it? I presented to you a friend. Okay? Maybe 20 years she's waiting for her husband to change. Okay? That husband is addicted to young women. Addiction na yun eh. Okay? But she's still waiting. She doesn't believe in divorce. She's very faithful. And then when the husband comes, she will say, I know you need it, but I still love you. So I used to tell her, you are tolerating your husband. Okay? And here I am, I'm a lover of no divorce. Parang gusto kong sabihin na rin, divorce mo na. Parang galit na ako dun sa husband. Kumpare ko yun eh. Sabi niya, ang lahat ng lalaki daw ganun. I'm just one of them, sabi nung asawa. But my friend is living what her mother lived. The mother lived, kasi Chinese to eh, no? The mother lived with her husband having another woman. So, my friend is living what she learned from her mother. In other words, yun yung minana niya sa nanay niya. That's it. I have no solution to her yet. No divorce for her. She's still waiting. But I told her, you go straight to heaven. Okay, that's all. Tapos na talaga ako. Tapos na. I'm finished.
I think we may be falling into a trap. Kasi there seems to be an assumption that majority of the population supports the divorce bill, and they're just trying to formalize it. So what if the Congress or Senate, let's move this into a referendum or a plebiscite. So that would also be a trap that maybe, sige, formalize natin, let's make it majority, i-referendum natin. But what if that referendum also favors divorce bill? So both ways, baka may weakness din yung, baka pabagsak talaga yung decision.
But I'm not sure whether, kasi the minute you open a referendum that will, to change the family code, to change the constitution, many congressmen will say no. Kasi marami pang magbabago, marami masisingit na, not just outside of the marriage issue. The minute you expose it, Chacha will come in, ang dami pang papasok dyan. So I don't think a referendum or a change in constitution is something that they are open to.
Baka gamitin lang siya. That we may fall into that trap. Sige, dahil hindi tayo nakapag-decide for so long, let the population decide on this. So baka yun, ma-fall tayo sa trap na yan.
we have any more questions? Yes, we're very thankful for the feedback. Yes, sister, I'm so thankful for what you told us, because we were very guided by your thoughts in our own pregame. To repeat what she said, going beyond church teaching, we have to let families be ready for what to expect in marriage, right? Even financial, even parenting, etc. So we are very much guided by that. So we'd like to thank our resource persons, Attorney Joel, Eileen, and Gillette. And we have to cut this now because we're running out of time for our streaming. And Martin has set things up for our streaming mass. So we'd like to thank you all for being here. You can stay on a bit. We still have brewed coffee there. There's a lot of it. And 3-in-1 and some snacks. So Manette, can you prepare our token for appreciation? Yes. I'm sorry, Totoy. Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much for being here. Maybe we'll end with a... No, Father is not here. I'll just have a little closing prayer for everyone. Totoy? Give us a closing prayer.
Thank you very much, Father, for this time. Thank you very much for the topics that we have learned this afternoon. And we hope that when we go out of this room, we have learned something about what marriage is all about. Thank you very much, Father. This we ask through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and
If you want one last thing, can you all post a photo? The great Filipino tradition of selfie. Okay.